Is that a show or something?
It's a 50 Cent produced show, I believe.
That's the one on Netflix?
Yeah. Or Hulu, actually, because that's who's paying the checks right now. So,
I thought you were talking about the other kind of dope. I was going to say, I could have been. You could have given me a heads up. That's what you were talking about.
Well, I do like to start as a disclaimer whenever we've had guests, and we've been on a string of having guests on Woke with Kids. Is do you plan to, or have you ever planned to run for public office in the future?
No. Not
okay.
At all.
All right. Fantastic. Then you have nothing to fear. I think all of your answers will be truthful and unabashed, and there's nothing that can be held against you in a professional setting heretofore.
What did you say heretofore?
Heretofore.
Wow.
Yeah. I like to deploy some legalese terminology every once in a while.
Wow. I don't know what a heretofore is.
Well, it's kind of like it's a golf swing. Is what
Okay.
No, so this is Woke with Kids, episode 1001,049. No, episode 104, episode 104, which is a lot of episodes.
Impressive.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We are nothing if not persistent and misguided. So. Give us a little bit of approval and validation, and we will give you the world. Tonight is another special night because we have a guest, a very special guest who is joining us way past bedtime. A fellow parent, a friend of the show, a repeat offender, friend of the show, Jon West-bey. Give it up, everybody. Give it up, TV land. All right, thank you.
The Justin Timberlake of Woke with Kids.
I think that analogy is more than apt. How do you maintain such a beautiful glow up in disposition in spite of having children, of which you have several?
Well, thank you for that compliment. I don't know how glowed up I look right now at 12:49 here, but I feel great, man. I'm just doing great, enjoying every moment, and as I tell folks, hey man, there's really only one bad day, and that's the last one. So
wow, okay,
I'll take all of them.
That's why we have you on the podcast, John, because your appreciation for the gravitas of things is unparalleled. Already a death reference. We are not even 5 minutes into the show. Fantastic. Unless anyone listening be worried, Mel is on the way, as I have mentioned before. She is not excluded from the podcast. I have not fired her. She has not fired me. We are still each other's co-hosts. We are still locked in blissed matrimony. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But while she puts down the chillins, John and I thought we would just rap a little bit, and when she shows up, then we'll talk more about whatever we're going to talk about. But before the show started, we were catching up, and we were talking about how strange it is that we both seem to find ourselves in states of the United States that have legal dope, and just what a wonderful thing that is. Do you want me to show? I'm showing myself right now, but I can show everyone your sort of beauty habits if you like. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I would love to share my beauty habits. We were talking about, I guess the TV show Dope, which I have not seen. I heard it's very good though. Mm-hmm. But we were also talking about legalized marijuana in California and in Washington D.C., where there is a certain legal status.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by a certain legal status? That sounds qualified in some way.
I from what I understand, in Washington D.C., you can, if you get caught with it, it is more treated like a fine than it is a misdemeanor or a crime, and so it's, because it's treated differently, it's kind of decriminalized, and I think you're allowed to grow a certain amount in your home, but for some reason you can't buy the seeds in DC. So somehow you would have had seeds magically appear.
Oh, I see.
And grown in your home, and there, so it's not like it's kind of an open air drug market here. There are limitations around it.
So if the drugs, so you're saying basically if through like spontaneous genesis, autogenesis, the seeds miraculously appear in the soil and they happen to sprout up some marijuana, then you are permitted by law to cut it, put it in something, and then smoke it.
If that's what it is that you like to do, sure.
Right.
But I don't know. I have my own personal feelings about it because, for years people spread a certain message, and people's lives were really affected by some of these drug laws and the stances that the government took on some of these things.
Absolutely.
And now to just kind of say, well, hey, we think it's okay now, and to me it's kind of bothersome because all the people whose records were affected by drug-related arrest, are you going to expunge all those records? Are you going to review those cases where it was just, a minor, joint that they found on somebody and then they end up spending 5 years in jail? There's really, I'm not going to celebrate just the ceremonial legalization without the consequences that came from a very harsh enforcement.
I see. No, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. I'm thinking. I'm considering my words because I guess what springs to mind, and also I was looking at the page flicker. What do you think ultimately, though, that the legalization of marijuana is a good thing overall? I see a lot of approval coming through on the live feed as well. Tosh, how you doing, Tosh, on the live feed? Never fear, Mel is on the way to join the podcast. She is simply putting the chillins to sleep, not because it is woman's work to do so, but because I am the only person in the family currently who has the ability to man the podcast, and that is what I'm doing right now.
To answer your question, yes. Yeah, I do think, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing. It shouldn't have been illegal in the first place. And because it made its way into the legal realm, and people were arrested, and people I don't want to go too much into it in this public forum, but you kind of know some of the things I'm referring to.
Yes, I do.
But it makes me personally upset that that whole aspect is just being glossed over when a lot of lives were ruined in drug wars that not only included that included marijuana. Now there are some, not to say that some drugs and the trafficking of some drugs came with violence that should have been regulated and should have been treated appropriately, but the fact that the government took this very harsh stance on marijuana and said it was a gateway drug and policed it and put actual records on people. Yeah, I think that when you legalize it, you got to reconcile all that.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of the conversation that is missing, is that there is no conversation around we've never had a conversation around retroactive justice except in the case of murder, when somebody is convicted of murder. And, nowadays you got genetic sort of evidence that can come out and exonerate people sometimes. Sometimes people recant their testimony, this sort of thing. But very rarely do we think about in terms of retroactive moral justice, because marijuana was never really a crime with a victim involved. It was always sort of if at the very worst, a self-inflicted choice. And for somebody to be selling you marijuana and to be locked up on the strength of that alone, it does beg the question of going back to examine the morality of that person's initial imprisonment. Because in any other case, when you talk about like setting a murderer free, well, obviously there's some you perceive the harm to their life. You're going to end their life. You're going to kill them. So you have to let them off death row. You have to let them go. But in the case of, I think these drug crimes, I think the real crime, I think the reason we don't immediately jump to that, or the reason that there isn't this overall conversation, is because, one, politics has become so polarized that it's impossible to really move the lever on most of that shit. But also because I think the real crime was being black. The real crime was never selling weed in the first place. The real crime was being a criminalized minority in the inner city, and this is the way that the inner city was going to derive revenue at that given time. I think now we have more of an understanding of how policing can become a undersided form of taxation, where you criminalize certain forms of behaviors that specifically apply to poor people, and then you get them embroiled in the criminal justice system, and then they got to keep showing up and accruing fees and having to miss work and all this kind of stuff, and all of it amounting to essentially a financial tax in the absence of more traditional taxation like property taxes or the value of one's home and that kind of thing that white people are more familiar with. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Now, that's not even a topic, guys. That's just some shit that we were just talking about because we're black men from the 90s. But since we are in the topic of catching hell, there's always so much catching hell to go around. You know what catching hell is. Catching hell is our segment where we discuss all the things in the world out there that are just from the devil, or from the worst place in our hearts, and we don't know why they keep flaming at us, turd-like, but they do, and all we can do is sometimes catch them and try to redirect them. So here's a really great one, considering the situation that a lot of people find themselves in the Southeast, is that FEMA, which is the agency which is responsible for responding to disasters, Vox is reporting that they have radically underestimated how vulnerable Americans are to flooding. Now, mind you, FEMA is a federal bureau which is headed up by the current president. Is that the word we're using for this? Yeah, president, I think, is the technical term for what he is. How are things for you right now? Are you experiencing this Hurricane Florence? Are you in danger?
No,
John?
No, I'm not really in danger in any way here. We've got a little bit of rain. My mom, who lives in Newport News, went to a hotel just temporarily, just for precaution's sake. But nowhere in this area has been in any real danger. From what I understand, it's hit more the Carolinas harder, but no, just some rain. That's good.
I'm glad to hear it. I called moms. I called dad. It's been a lot of rain down in Virginia and North Carolina, but nothing that has been any damage to the house, which is the key thing. Yeah, exactly. Any damage to the house, that's thousands of dollars of damage, money that regular people don't have, a lot of people don't have in cash savings. So it's a huge blow, and it's difficult to think of this hurricane and the potential damage, the fact that lives have been lost. You know what I'm saying? There have been already deaths which have accumulated due to this hurricane, without thinking of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Puerto Rico, where I think the trustworthy estimates from experts have the death toll somewhere like 3,000 deaths as a result, not just at the moment that the hurricane struck, but also as a result of the failed rescue efforts and just the incredible devastation done to the island. Is Puerto Rico still part of America, man? What's going on, yo? How you feel about Puerto Rico?
What happened in that hurricane is devastating, and I think that they deserve all the help that they can get, including from wherever it comes from private money, from the government. Any loss of life is terrible, and I hate to kind of put a plug in, but the Poetry Museum,
I love it.
The museum
like
I worked with and founded, and have worked with for several years, is hosting an event called Poets for Puerto Rico this weekend, where we'll be having poets speak out and talk about the situation that's going on and help to support people in Puerto Rico through poetry.
That's fantastic. And the Poetry Museum is located in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
If you're on the East Coast.
We're coming on our 15th year, so
that is amazing. 15 years of Poetry Museum. I still remember being in the dorm room at VCU and you telling me that your dream was to start a museum, and I remember thinking, how odd.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
But you know what, man? That's the only kind of cats that I would choose to have around me, honestly, in the long term, is that if you're not... you know what? Speaking of odd, I'm sorry, this is completely a woke with kid tangent, but I have to share this with you because you are a father. So my son and his friend are in the back seat and they're discussing Avengers, right? The last movie. Have you seen it? Because I don't want to ruin it for you.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, of course, in this movie, everybody dies, or at least half of everybody dies.
Well, everybody disappears.
Disappears. What have you? Is erased temporarily for now, whatever that means, because you got the time stone. My son, almost on his own, basically came up with the edge case of, what if at that moment that Thanos snapped his fingers, there was actually an odd number of living things in the universe? Wouldn't that mean that somewhere in the universe, like a dude who's just like perfectly okay and healthy, suddenly is just like paraplegic from the waist down because he's fine, but you know what I'm saying?
Well, I can only imagine that, you know, there's some rounding going on with this extinction that happens. So we'll see what happens. There are a lot of great fan theories, and I know that you're a comic book head. And
I am. I'm a big one.
I think that you probably read what happens in the comic book side, and I just can't wait to see what the MCU does with its own, and of course with the teasing the Captain Marvel and, you know, teasing Adam Warlock. I mean, I would love to see those folks on screen. Yeah, man.
Look, don't get me in my nerd bag, okay, guys. That's a whole other vibe. I don't know if we have female listeners, and I'm not sure. I don't know how. Maybe a lot of them are into Marvel U. I mean, Mel is kind of, but no, I'm super psyched to see what happens out of this Thanos shit. And like you, I do know kind of after the comic book, but anybody with a half a brain knows Black Panther is coming back. I mean, they made far too much money for that to be the end of the franchise. So,
and I know that Chadwick Boseman signed a 5 movie deal. So I can't imagine that, they're going to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I took from that into that movie, honestly, was basically, it was essentially channeling the feeling that we all had when Donald Trump got elected. It was that feeling of like, oh shit, does the movie just, so this is just what it is now? This is just how the Marvel universe is until there is another Avengers, essentially. That is how I felt. That's why I felt like they left it like that. And I think, honestly, depending on how we vote in the election, I think that really might depend on if these motherfuckers come back or not. That's just my fan theory. That's my overarching fan theory. Is I think I might hear Mel to somebody close to, maybe not. But that's my theory, is that this is a great big metaphor. You know what I mean? And Thanos represents Trump. He represents the ultimate authoritarianism, the ultimate, I will decide, I know what is best for you. I mean, do you just read, maybe you read this also, getting into more Trump be Trumping type of stuff. We're now issuing a tariff on almost half of all Chinese goods at this point. After he announced another $200 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods. And now also going directly after consumer goods, putting a tariff on consumer goods. I mean, you know what this means, right? We're talking about Happy Meals, the 99-cent store. I mean, how does Buck 98 store sound, right? Not nearly the same ring, if you ask me, but
that's still a great price, though.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's true. We are still spoiled first world Americans in that sense. Yeah,
I mean, I've never really thought of it that way. It's an interesting way to look at it. I kind of look at it as my fan theory is that all of the original Avengers, you'll notice, are the ones that were left standing at the end of the movie. And I think that it is going to in some way flip. All of those remaining Avengers are going to die, and I think Peter Parker is going to come to lead the new Avengers, which will include all the people integrated. And it's going to be kind of a changing of the guard in the MCU, and they're going to retire Iron Man, they're going to retire Thor, they're going to retire all the characters that had led up to that event, is what I think.
Oh, but damn, I see that actually makes a lot of financial sense, because I mean, at this point, even if they started off as kind of nobodies, they're now well recognized, extremely high paid actors who are also aging.
Yes.
Right, and can't continue to do this forever, because it's not like actual comic books where you can just keep on recycling a dude for 40, 50, 60 years. That is an interesting take, and now they're trying to move it into a different generation of heroes so they can start to capitalize on that. Interesting.
And then, of course, with a lot of these Marvel characters coming into the MCU, I believe, there may be plans to finally bring the Fantastic Four into this world, to bring the X-Men into this world. And I mean, that would just open up a lot of new possibilities, but I don't think they can do that holding on to some of those older characters. So, and I think that positioning Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, as a central and powerful figure in the MCU, I think it's almost like it mirrors politics, I think, in terms of the Me Too movement, in terms of women getting more prominence and getting more of a voice. If you think about it this way, let's just say it plays out where Thanos gets defeated by Captain Marvel. You will now have the most powerful character in the Marvel universe will be, MCU at least, will be a woman, and you'll have, the most technologically advanced place will be in Africa. You know what I mean? You'll have this complete shift, right? Of a new way of looking at the world, where look at all the other folks that were left before. You had Bruce Banner, a white scientist. You had Tony Stark. You have, all these folks that are just kind of the last of the white males. And I think this new MCU is going to be a lot more diverse and led by a woman.
Wow. I love that. I mean, it's also sort of art reflecting the realities that we need, even if they don't exist, even if they're not existent. We will never be able to go and have a Hillary. We'll never be able to see what that was like, but we can all imagine. We all have a sense of what it would feel like if that sort of stability and consistency and competence were put at the wheel. And these superhero films, which are, I've always maintained, and it's not like a radical or original perspective, are modern myths now writ large. You know what I mean? They are that. No, it is. You're right. I think there's a lot of substance to that. The idea that the way that they're setting these characters up because if you think about it, it's really the way that we got Obama. I mean, up until four or 5 year run up to before Obama was actually elected, it was like every hip show or cool show had a black president. You know what I mean? It was like 24. I mean, there was 24 black. I feel like 24 was one of them. But there was a whole bunch of shows where they had a black president, and it was way before we even thought the shit was, really a serious proposition. And hey, it's Mel! Yay! Yay! And but yeah, I felt like that Hollywood was preparing us, you know what I'm saying? Was preparing us for, I mean, in a way, I guess what I'm saying, these alt-writers are totally right. They're programming us, man. We live in a simulation. You got to take the red pill. Escape, everybody. I'm joking. But in some ways, it is true. Like whatever they set up in terms of the simulated narrative does seem to end up becoming what we accept as mainstream reality. And right now, why would we want to limit the market to just calcified old white people, old white men, when we could sell this content being whatever, agnostic, to everybody, right? It's a money thing. It's not really a moral issue at all. It's pragmatic.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why Nike hedged its bets on Kaepernick. Because I think they're looking several years into the future and saying, this generation that's younger is going to be more progressive. There's going to be more progressive people in different areas of the country, and sure, we'll lose a few thousand people if it means capturing the larger audience 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, because Nike seems to have gotten away from that situation in particular scot-free, because their stock hit an all-time high a couple of days ago, like some 31% over its all-time high. The sentiment rating, approval rating of the ad was through the roof by all measurements in my industry. People simply, did not have the reaction that Breitbart and Fox News thought that they were going to have, and I keep drawing a parallel between this and the Civil War, or this being sort of an echo and an emanation of the Civil War. That even in the Civil War, the deck was stacked, in that the North had all of the money, the industry, and the production ability, and the South was essentially good at producing labor and raw materials. Right?
The soldiers.
Soldiers, yeah, that too. Soldiers too. So like now I feel like we find ourselves in a repeat of this situation in the modern day where, where the majority of us are living in cities and trying to get jobs in the new service industry, the service economy, on whatever level we can. my baby?
Got my lighter, please?
Yes, of course.
Hey, Mel.
Thank you.
John says, hey. She can't hear you because she didn't have her headphones on yet.
Hey, John.
How you doing?
He can hear you, though.
I understand.
Yeah, man. All of that. So anyways, now that we have Mel, let's move into some real topics. Not that these haven't been real topics, because Kaepernick is obviously a very real topic, and I enjoy discussing it because I love it when racist white people have to eat crow and the world doesn't conform to their expectations. I just find that to just be delicious. But now that we have Mel, let's talk about some things that have been going on in all of our minds. Hi, everybody. It is actually Woke with Kids now because Mel has arrived. It's not just me talking to my old buddy because that would be a whole different podcast. Although we should think about that. It might be might be a good podcast. But Mel is here. And Mel, of course, is my co-host, and peace and blessings and all that stuff. Pretend like you've been hearing that the whole time. Mel, what, I haven't really gotten anything. Me and John have been shooting the shit. What has been the biggest news, that's been on your mind, that's been going on this week?
You guys have been recording the podcast?
We've been going live. Yeah.
Are we going to do the podcast?
Yeah, it's recording.
I just asked you that.
Yeah. Everything is recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear me ask him that? Have you guys been doing the podcast? And you said no, we're doing the live.
I don't remember.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Hey everybody.
Well, I'm just saying, like, we've been talking, but it's not the podcast you got here. That's what I'm saying. Like, I haven't done any of the topics.
I just didn't hear any music or anything, or the intro to "Hey, we're Woke with Kids."
We're definitely we are recording. Yes, we are recording. Yes, absolutely.
So it is the podcast.
Yeah, but we haven't done like any good topics or anything. I'm saying it's just like me and Mel.
Of course, you've been doing good topics.
Like we haven't talked about anything contemporary. We haven't done any Trump be Trumping. We've like
okay,
the meat of the stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's not a thing without you, honey. Is what I'm trying to get at.
I think we saved the best for you, Mel.
Yes, exactly.
I can't hear John, and I have headphones on.
Okay, let me fix that. We're fixing headphones. Oh, that's because they're not plugged in. That's right. I'll do it. All right. There we go. All right. Fantastic.
Okay.
Woo, now it's a proper Woke with Kids episode. Okay. I am fixing audio stuff. I have been addressed and reprimanded by Mel. I feel like this is good.
I always got to be the bad guy.
No, you're not the bad guy. You're the.
How did I reprimand?
The reprimander is the person who is in the right. If I'm remembering things correctly.
I barely said 3 words.
Huh?
I said I've barely said anything. Whatever.
All right. What has been going on this week, Mel, on your
I don't know.
All right. Fair enough. I got a list of things on some catching hell that we can talk about, okay?
Oh, we got to talk about the Dallas cop, and how they're like, oh, we found weed in his apartment. So I guess she's justified in busting through and shooting him. Well, she didn't bust through, but... they're just trying to villainize him.
Villainize him.
As they are wont to do.
Okay, so, yeah. John, you're familiar with this story, are you not?
I'm somewhat familiar about the off-duty police officer that shot her because she supposedly mistook his apartment
for hers, yes.
That's right. That is correct. So, now apparently, if I understand what Mel is saying, and I have been keeping up because I've been working a lot. You're saying that they are now saying that they found marijuana in his apartment, in the guy's apartment, and they are using that to color. Yes, I understand.
The victim.
They yes, because that's how they do. Because obviously, if you have weed in your apartment, you deserve to die.
That's the implication.
Oh wow! It's funny about that because we were just talking about dope in the beginning of the podcast and how it's legal here and it's legal in DC, or
is it
some sort of variety species of legal in DC? Can you recap that, John? It's
yeah. I mean, from what I understand, it is downgraded from a crime to just something where if you get caught with it, I believe you just pay a fine and you're allowed to grow a certain amount in your home, but you're not allowed to buy the seeds within DC. So it's, if seeds happen to magically appear in your home, then you can, I guess it's okay for you to smoke it, or do whatever you want with it. But as I explained earlier, I just personally have strong feelings about it because so many lives have been ruined by an intolerance of marijuana, and they're even using this in this case, saying that, well, because he had marijuana, that it implies something dangerous. And now all of a sudden there are people making millions of dollars off of something that a lot of people that I know growing up sold, and when it was illegal, and we were told that these people were criminals and needed to be dealt with harshly, and now have criminal records. And I think that the Justice Department needs to reconcile all of these arrests and expunge some records. And
definitely,
it's not something that just, it's like, oh, hey, we can smoke weed now. It's much more complicated than that, and I want to see some of that harder work done, because it's easy to make money. I mean, I think young people all across the country have proven that you can make a lot of money selling weed. That was never a surprise to us. Is that the tremendous fight and the sacrifice that young black men specifically had to give in order to push this industry when it was illegal, and now all of a sudden it's legal, and guess who's not benefiting? The young black men who were out there selling before, because we're in prison now. And
exactly,
it's
Yeah,
that's the real crime. And I just want to point out, they found this marijuana in his apartment after a search warrant. I'm like, well, what the fuck did we find in her apartment? I mean, I would hope that they searched her apartment as well. But I have yet to see any reports or headlines about the results of the search warrant on her apartment.
Right.
Or what was up her drug test?
Well, it was already suspect after you didn't hear nothing about her story until after, like, days later. And then all of a sudden, like, after she'd had an opportunity to confer with her colleagues and everything, they came out with this sort of unified front about what had happened was, and that story does not jive up with two independent witnesses who were at the scene who were saying
they didn't hear her say anything about her identifying herself as a police officer. And Nothing.
So, yeah, it's clear to me that something, something is amiss, and they're not being upfront about it. My personal fan theory, we're talking about the Avengers. My personal conspiracy theory is I think they were probably knocking boots, and homeboy.
No, that proved to be false.
That did not happen.
That was trolls.
That was trolls. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
there was no relationship.
Damn, I don't know what it is.
There was no.
I mean,
relationship.
It's more painful to think. It's more painful to think that this woman literally just walked into this man's house and shot him for no reason, than it is to think that she was at least twisted, by the D or something. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's
just so eerily similar to, I feel like, the Trayvon Martin case, where we only really get one side.
Right.
The other person, the other party is dead, so we don't know what he did or didn't do.
Yes.
It's her word against a dead boy, a man, a dead person.
It's disgusting. It's really bad. Speaking of cannabis, you can now earn a degree in marijuana after graduating from this college.
That's bullshit. I mean, they need to release all the people in jail and prison on these marijuana charges. Give them a motherfucking degree. They can pass a test or whatever. Give them a damn degree, and give them all opportunities funded by the government or whatever states have now legalized it for them to get in on the industry if they desire.
If you are looking for a $70,000 job right out of college, you need to go get an application to Northern Michigan University, and you want to sign up for the medicinal chemistry undergraduate program. The marijuana focused course, however, does not teach students how to roll blunts or test their ability to make edible brownies. Oh, that's clever. The writer added that in, you know.
I mean, some of these people locked up could teach the class.
I know, probably really well, actually.
You know what I'm saying? We got PhDs.
They say it's not an easy program. It's really intense biology, chemistry program. Well, anyways, I just find that's just wonderful. I'm going to ask Langston if he's interested in pursuing this course. What kind of world are we coming to?
Well, I mean, it's also one of those things where if it mirrors everything else that seems to happen in this country, is, let's just say, you know, all of these opportunities are happening for people that have always succeeded in business. Now, what's going to happen? Let's just say that this weed industry gets taken over by black men. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be seen as equally legitimate? Are we going to have equal access to these loans and these...
Exactly.
Are we going to have access to all this stuff?
Right. Can they get a small business loan?
Yeah. So that you know...
Who's going to let them lease a space and get the permits and the...
You know, so it's kind of like, hey, you can get a degree in weed now, but I think this industry is firming itself up to be just as exclusive as all the other industries, and it really frustrates me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, here's some other frustrating news. Have you heard that some McDonald's workers were striking over sexual harassment? Did you hear about this?
No.
Okay, so emboldened by the Me Too movement, McDonald's workers have voted to stage a one-day strike next week. This was a week ago. At restaurants in 10 cities in hopes of pressuring management to take a stronger step against on-the-job sexual harassment. Plans for the walkout to start at lunchtime. Oh, this was last week. Oh, no, tomorrow. This is plans for the walkout to start at lunchtime on September 18th, which is tomorrow, when this podcast should be out, have been approved in recent days by women's committees formed by employees at dozens of McDonald's restaurants across the U.S. Lead organizers include several women who filed complaints with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in May, alleging pervasive harassment at some of McDonald's franchise restaurants. So, not in addition to wanting fair wages, these women are also saying that they would appreciate if you would stop sexually harassing them. What do we think about these? Are they asking for too much or far too much?
Yeah, leave them alone and give them some money.
All right. Well, that seems like a far too simple solution to debate, honestly. So that's we'll leave it. We'll leave that there. I agree. I have nothing to add. Let's see if there's something we can disagree on. Here's something. Recently, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa made the case for South African land reform. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but South Africa, a lot of its land is actually owned by white people. Yeah. As a matter of it's a sort of historical kerfuffle, you know. No reason to get into it, really. You know, bada bing, bada bang. White people own the country in Africa. Africans rebel. You know, they get their freedom. And now they're talking about transferring some of that land to black ownership. And the white people that, quote unquote, own it are very upset about that. In the cases that it's occurring, I might be mischaracterizing it right now as I'm describing it to you, because Trump heard that and he basically used that to inflame his base by telling them that South Africa was taking away land from white people.
Is there an update to this? Because we talked about this several months ago.
Yes. Well, the update is that Cyril Ramaphosa came out to tell everyone, relax. that he's not actually stealing white people's land, that really what he's doing is just making sure that the process will end up very well.
For black people?
For black people.
Well, it also feeds into a narrative on what was the extreme right at some point about, and I don't know if any of your folks that listen to this have listened to like InfoWars and Glenn Beck and all that kind of stuff, where it is part of a larger narrative where that is a ongoing topic in those communities about white rights and feeling like they have to defend white rights around the world. And it's I think when Trump mentions things like this, kind of like when in Charlottesville where he says both sides, saying, mentioning white people getting their land taken away is a dog whistle to people in that community without having to come out and actually say anything. Interesting.
Dog whistle. So much is communicated in dog whistles now. In our culture. Honey, do you have anything to say about South Africans transferring land to white people? Is this a
no, not without an official update about actual numbers or what's happening. No.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think we have those yet. What we do have is an update on staying with the Catching Hell theme. Cosby, he rapes but he saves, according to Chappelle. Is Cosby's lawyers and wife are seeking the judge's recusal before sentencing. What's interesting about this to me is that the last I had heard is that Camille was leaving Cosby, moving out of the house, separating assets. Yes, absolutely. Separating assets. This was 100% happening. But now, again, she's back standing for her man. And she's saying that they're arguing that the judge should have previously disclosed a feud he had with a key witness in the case. So clearly, we know what this means. All those women were lying, right, honey? Is that what this clears everything up, right? No? Nobody? Yeah, I didn't think so. What it does clear up, though, is that clearly Camille is still down with her husband. She is not leaving him. She is not. She does not seem to be in any sort of distress or conflict with his actions and where she has to go in order to support him as his wife. Do you find this to be offensive or very offensive?
I don't really give a fuck what she does, really. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I know what I feel or believe about Cosby, and whether to me, they could both be true. She could be like, hey, the judge is being a little unfair, and she could also be trying to separate some assets and set herself up so that she is good to go when he goes to prison. I mean, to me, those aren't necessarily two separate things. She could also be like, honey, I do stand by you. I hope they go easy on you. You're right. This judge is unfair. And that really doesn't mean that she can't also be looking out in a strategic way to protect some financial assets that they may share or whatever the case may be. And whether she does or doesn't, I really don't care.
Okay.
Because, as far as I have heard or read, she has made it pretty clear that she is supporting him to a large degree throughout this, and yeah, that's her choice.
All right then.
I mean, I'm not here to shame her, whatever she want to do, like whatever.
How about you, John? Do you want to shame her in any way?
I do not want to publicly shame anyone. You know.
I mean, sorry.
If Camille Cosby wants to stand by her husband of many, many years, that has nothing to do with what I would do in this situation. So
exactly,
I can't speak on her. I mean, she's supportive. That's all I can say.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I have gleaned through the years of these accusations and the trial.
Right.
And yeah, that's none of my business. I don't know her.
All right. Well,
and it's like I don't have any real judgments to pass per se because I don't care.
Right on. Okay.
And it's not like entertaining to me, or it doesn't really resonate with me. I'm not even interested, as opposed to like a Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, where I'm like, oh, that's mildly entertaining. Let me throw my 2 cents in because I'm a fan of the music per se. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Camille, or not a fan, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't do what she's doing, but
it's good to know, honey. Good to know. Good to know. Well, let's shift the Me Too lens just slightly because there's another Me Too sort of story swirling around, obviously, with our man's Brett Kavanaugh, who is currently aspiring to a seat on the Supreme Court, otherwise known as SCOTUS. And apparently there's a woman who knew Brett back in the day. And when they were in high school, and she alleges that he was not 100% a gentleman in an encounter that they had, that he was drunk and that he was handsy and he was trying to basically, assault her and take her clothes off and do things to her.
And the key part, the key detail that kind of stood out to me was that he covered up her mouth to muffle any screams for help.
Right.
And from what I hear, people are like, oh, well, he was 17. We should give him a pass for something that he did back in the day. Or, I think as far as I have read, it's a credible allegation. She's taken a lie detector test. There are records of her speaking on this incident with her therapist, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
There is a third party who could be a witness who has yet to testify. And I do think that as it being credible, as far as there being some sort of documentation of her coming forward, that we should hear testimony under oath from Kavanaugh, also from this woman, and also from the other witness before the Senate votes on his confirmation. We do deserve to hear what the fuck they have to say. He should be able to defend himself against these allegations. I just think with something that is such a big issue, and especially not only the incident and it being wrong, but also the fact, is he lying? Did he lie about it? And the whole idea, is he a fucking liar? Should be a little bit more sussed out before they vote to confirm him, as opposed to what it feels like, which is kind of rushing it through. The same way they have been withholding certain documents or other instances that imply that he has lied in terms of his time serving under, was it George W. Bush?
That's right.
I think all of those questions that continue to come up should have, clearer answers before they vote, and then people can at least vote with what they believe to be at that time the most amount of facts.
He is one of the most unpopular nominees for the Supreme Court. He's
barely going to escape by.
Yeah,
so if he does get confirmed this week.
I am at this point. The vote has been postponed because it was only days out. That vote has been postponed until this woman can testify, which is something. I find it ironic that maybe in the end, what saves the republic is just the honor of women. You know what I mean? What What if that is all that keeps us from a lot of these savages?
I think it would be really interesting if this story and these allegations were what kept him from being confirmed, because to some degree it forces us to recall the nomination for Clarence Thomas and the allegations by Anita Hill and her testimony, and how I just saw on CNN how there was like a 52% favorability for confirming Clarence Thomas at the time in 1991 or whatever it was. And then after Anita Hill came out with her allegations, approval went up 58%. And then after her testimony, it was like 62% confirm him. So, again, that was a very different time in the culture and the society in terms of the idea of believing women versus believing a powerful man. So it would be very interesting to see if this held any weight. But, people still elected a president who has very credible allegations against him. So I would be very unsurprised if this did not hinder Kavanaugh's nomination and eventual confirmation.
Well, if nothing else, I think even if the Democrats don't succeed in preventing Kavanaugh's confirmation, I think, and you tell me what you guys think, I think what we're looking at is at least the end of the impression or the assumption that the Supreme Court is a nonpartisan entity.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what happens now, we're looking at the court and we're evaluating it through the lens of what are the priorities of, the minority or the majority party.
Right.
So,
exactly.
and I think
the Supreme Court has become completely politicized.
Yeah, and that feels like a huge loss. Just today I heard that Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, intervened in a lower court ruling to prevent a stay on. A lower court had basically said that donors had to reveal who they were. Certain donors had to reveal who they were if they were giving money over a certain amount. And Chief Justice Roberts actually stayed that ruling from a lower court until after the election, so these people would not have to reveal their identities. And I've never, maybe Supreme Court justices do that shit all the time, but I've never heard of something that blatant, or even reading about what justices do beyond ruling on a specific case.
Why? What was his reason? What was his legal, constitutional,
I would be honest with you,
backed reason for why that would be the appropriate thing to do?
I'm going to be honest, I didn't...
I can promise you, until you do right by me, everything you think about is going to crumble.
Chief Justice Roberts stepped in Saturday to halt a federal judge's order that a conservative political group said threatened to discourage so-called independent expenditures by broadening the circumstances in which anonymous donors could be exposed. In other words, they thought that it would suppress donations if these rich people had to admit who they were and what they were supporting. So Roberts acted Saturday after a 3-judge D.C. Circuit panel turned down the same arguments for a stay earlier in the day. U.S. District Court Judge Beryl A. Howell in August issued a ruling invalidating a Federal Election Commission's regulation that has allowed donors to so-called dark money groups to remain anonymous. Right? This sounds like a good thing. You want to know where this dark money is coming from, where these funds are coming from. Anyways, the 38-year-old FEC regulation in dispute requires disclosure only when a donor designates his or her money for a specific independent expenditure, but does not require donors' identities be made public under other conditions, including when they seek to support or oppose an individual candidate. This is all very fascinating policy wonk stuff. I know that is not answering the question. I'm looking. The district's court ruling was set to take effect on September 17th until Roberts intervened on Saturday. It is not clear whether Roberts' order is a short-term measure intended to allow further consideration of the issue by the justices, or whether it will remain in place through this fall's midterm elections. It really doesn't say why he got involved or for what reason or who pleaded with this. It just seems like he just is doing shit like a politician does now. Like, I have the power to do this, so I'm doing this. I don't know. You know what I mean? But it does.
I think for most of the 20th century, we had more liberal courts. And I mean, a lot of conservative groups in the 60s complaining about activist judges because they were the people who really worked behind the scenes legally to get a lot of civil rights done. And so I think once you saw Reagan come in and really start to dismantle that, even starting back with Nixon, where Republicans put it on their agenda to make a much more conservative court, I think you're starting to see one of the busiest activist conservative courts that you've seen in a long time. And I think things like intervening in lower courts, I can't remember the case, but the case where now you can develop super PACs, you're starting to see an activist court in another way, in a much more conservative way that benefits very wealthy people and does not benefit more progressive causes.
Yeah, we're living in the post Koch era. The Koch brothers have.
We've never been alive during that liberal activist court.
Yeah.
It got dismantled in the 80s, and I think the last of those judges were Thurgood Marshall, and you still have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but I mean it's the liberal active judge is a thing of the past, and unfortunately I would like to hear some more of those voices on the Supreme Court to give balance to it. And I don't personally consider myself an extremely liberal person, but I think the liberal voice is necessary in all discussions.
Boom. Wow. All right, that's I think we've been sufficiently deep. Honey, do you have any super deep stuff that we catching hell?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's good. Let's move on. That was an incredibly erudite and eloquent summation of that particular subject, I think. So let's talk about something a little less serious. Let's start coasting towards the far shore of this podcast. I don't know if you saw this movie before, so I don't want to exclude you too long if you haven't. But have you seen Sorry to Bother You?
No. Let me be very clear. You all are some of the hippest people that I know that are in my age group and
Fair
keep
enough.
up with all the things that go on in pop culture. Let me tell you, the only TV that I watch is Family Feud with Steve Harvey. That is really the only thing I watch on TV. Occasionally I'll watch a Netflix movie here and there, but
my goodness,
for the most part I do not pay attention to news. I do not watch popular television, so I am getting an education by listening to you all talk about these things, and I just have no interest in getting through news media. Well,
this is what we're here for. We are here for the modern parent who needs just a little boost in their. That's it.
I would just like to throw out one suggestion. I think if you were going to consider adding one media, show to your roster in addition to Family Feud, I just want to nominate Atlanta.
Word.
I think it is
you watch Atlanta, though. Come on, right?
Nope.
I think he just said he don't watch it. I think it's extremely entertaining and insightful and thought-provoking. It's short. These are short 30-minute episodes. I just want to throw that recommendation out there for you.
Can I also add that, just for the record, you have been a 40-year-old man since we were in college. It's really makes no sense.
That is true.
You didn't watch much TV then, is what I'm saying. Not a ton of it back then as well. Well, sorry to bother you. Mel and I finally did go see it.
We did.
We went and checked it out. It was a date afternoon. And overall, I just want to say, whoa. Whoa. That was a lot. That was a lot, yo.
I'm big on indie black films and supporting filmmakers, so I was really excited when it was re-released in select theaters because we kind of missed it right when it came out, and I was very excited to see it. A lot of people that I know had a lot of good things to say about it. I love my little first time filmmakers, and I want to give a hearty 2 thumbs up to the first 2/3 of the movie. It was wildly entertaining, shocking, but in a really provocative way that I was wildly entertained by. I think since we saw it kind of late in its release, the theater was not filled with black people. We may have been the only 2 out of the maybe 20 people in the theater.
And we were cackling.
I mean, it was hilarious. And I just couldn't believe that everyone wasn't laughing as much as we were. I was genuinely shocked. I mean, if they were going to go so far to watch the movie, I thought that their sensibilities were a little bit more in line with, what I kind of assumed just from the trailer and previews and everything that I'd heard about it, of that kind of absurdist view, but very much from a black perspective. So that was a little weird, that they weren't enjoying it as much as I was, but that didn't bother me too much. But the movie just took a hard left, like, kamikaze dive into a really, really weird premise.
Yeah, it basically, like, the first 2/3 of it were kind of like a Spike Lee film on acid as channeled, filtered through Michelle Gondry. And then the last half of it is suddenly jumped the shark to full on
it was really
Black
the last
Mirror.
third. It was
the last third kind of just jumped full on to Black Mirror. I know you don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, are there people? Would
you're doing
anyone?
fantastic.
Is anyone maybe commenting on the Facebook Live? I'd be really curious. We're late to the game.
It's
but
super late. Nobody's left.
And then also, I think what was difficult for me to really swallow was that the entire last act hinged on this really crazy idea, as opposed to it being maybe some sort of supporting secondary storyline. I mean, the whole thing just had to go in this direction, and I think ultimately I was not feeling it.
And because you're never going to see it, I don't really feel like I'm going to spoil it for you or anybody else does. Basically, horse people
come into the movie.
The big revelation is
Spoiler,
that this ultra evil corporation called Worry Free, essentially in the future, a corporation
the very near future
called Worry Free will give you room, board, and food, and you don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is what they say,
and just go to work.
Which is essentially slavery. But it's owned by a really hip, cool man bun white dude. So it can't be slavery, can it? And the workforce is sold and traded by this workforce of power callers who are essentially like, but anyways, that's not even the point. That's just the overall plot, right? But then for some reason, this rich, nefarious white dude decides the best way to increase profits is to turn the labor force into horse people, equisapiens, because horses are stronger, can do more work, and maybe they'd be less complainy than humans.
But then, but they're still part Homo sapien, so they are cognizant that they were duped, and that they are now not only slaves, but also part horse.
Your expression right now.
And they are not happy about it.
So
I don't know. I don't even know how to talk about it, honestly.
So like the last third, it kind of implies that this guy turned him into a horse person, but he hasn't changed yet, and he's like freaking out the whole. You don't even know about it
to the very. That's like the last.
Am I being punked right now? Is this a real...
I felt like I was being punked as I sat in the theater. Okay, how your face looks, I believe, is how my face looked
for the last
as I sat in the theater.
30 minutes of the movie.
I thought it was silent before, but once we stopped laughing, you could hear a pin drop,
bro, in
the theater.
I just keep saying, essentially, what I feel like is that Boots Riley.
It was a metaphor gone awry.
It's from the coup. He's a musician. Somehow he stumbled on a glitch in the Matrix. This is a dude that clearly knew he may not be able to make another movie ever again. And so he put all the things in this movie. I encourage you to see it when it comes on small screen, bro.
Yeah.
It really is. It is a classic of black film. I think it's a classic now, if for no other reason, because there's literally nothing like it. Nothing else like it.
I will say this. I am glad that he got a chance to make this movie, and I applaud the production team for taking a chance and distributing it. And because I feel that white filmmakers who make completely absurdist, crazy out there shit get that same opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I am happy that it was in theaters and that I could go and I could come out and maybe not like it.
Exactly.
That's all I got.
Wow.
Yes, it really did happen. All right, honey, what else was on your mind, and what else can we talk about?
Well, did you hear that Casey Lemons, I'm
assuming,
who is the director of the wonderful film Eve's Bayou, as well as I think she did The Caveman's Valentine. She is a black woman director and very talented. She is going to be directing a biopic about Harriet Tubman.
Oh shit.
But apparently there is controversy because the actress and singer Cynthia Erivo, who recently magnificently portrayed, I thought, Miss Celie in the Broadway musical The Color Purple, an astounding soprano voice. I mean, every time she sings, I just cry. Mm-hmm. She is also in the new movie that just premiered at the Toronto Film Festival, Widows, which is by the director Steve McQueen, who directed 12 Years a Slave and Shame, starring Viola Davis and Brian Tyree Henry and some other people. Cynthia Erivo is also in that. So she is going to be portraying Harriet Tubman, and there are people who are not happy about it because she is a British actress of African descent as opposed to an African American actress. And obviously Harriet Tubman was a black woman from here in America who freed hundreds and thousands of slaves and was a spy and all these things. A great American hero, African American hero. So people are very much upset about the fact that yet another African American icon is going to be portrayed by a British actor, calling back to David Oyelowo playing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma. And I'm sure there's other examples of that. But, you know, it's been said for a long time, these black British actors are taking our roles. And here they are again, one of our most beloved African-American heroines, again, now to be portrayed by someone who is not African-American. So I'm curious what y'all think.
Well,
do you think it can only truly or should be portrayed? Oh, and of course, I mean, this is slightly different. This is more of a color issue, but we had Zoe Saldana, who is also not African American, playing the great Nina Simone. So, right. Although she's not British, but we do have, you know, Hollywood, I guess, has a track record of if they do cast someone of the same hue, as opposed to like a Scarlett Johansson in a role that was certainly never envisioned as a white woman. Casting just any old black person who they feel is right for the role, as opposed to really delving into the nuance of getting an African-American actor to play someone who particularly is held in such high esteem in the African-American community and the American history community, in general.
What do you think? What do you think, bro? Would you let a light-skinned dude play you? Can a light-skinned dude play you?
No, not even a light-skinned dude. Can a British dude play you?
I think it's it pushes more for us to own our own platforms, and so we can make those decisions. If you are a Black American and you think that it should be played by a Black American, then make the movie and get the funding and get the ownership that you need to be able to make those decisions. I'm all for who would do the best job. I'm probably not going to see the movie anyway, so unless they have some special crossover episode with Steve Harvey and Family Feud, hey, best of luck to them. But I always push for ownership, so that if you don't agree with the decision, then do it yourself.
I can dig that. That's very Marcus Garvey of you. I tend to feel like what's essentially happened is that I agree with what you said, that I think the best person for the job should get the job. I also believe in representation. I happen to think that two things can be true at the same time, to quote the Bard. But in this instance, the two things that can be true is that.
Did you say quote the Barge?
Yes, absolutely. That's the only Bard that I quote is the Barge. Listen to the beat of the rhythm of the night. But in this particular instance, I feel like what can be true is that you can have Africans who are better at portraying a particular role because they have a background in acting, or essentially because they come from a certain economic class and have a certain privilege in order to get these skills, right? And then also it can be important that there is representation for young African-American kids to know that they can aspire and become that great actor and be inspired by that person's performance. I don't think that it's exclusive. I don't think that... I think that's just another vehicle of separation, to keep the diaspora from uniting with the root, is that I refuse to compete with other black people around the world. You know what I mean? Like my racism, I had experienced racism in America, but your country had experienced colonialism at the hands of white people and Europeans and raping that country, and that's why your country isn't where it's supposed to be. So like everyone has suffered. So if a black person of African descent, direct African descent, a continental African, gets an opportunity to play one of my heroes, what I feel like is that's just a Nancy stitching us all closer together. That's just the web being compressed. You know what I'm saying? And us learning each other's stories more accurately. What I want to see in the future, because think about the reverse of that. Wakanda is a made up African country from the American imagination, played by a South Carolina black dude, a Geechee black dude, pretending to speak Xhosa. You know what I mean? So I'm like, it's vice versa. It's not like they the only. And who played all the Africans in Roots? You know what I'm saying?
Who
like
played Lamuma?
Yeah, I'm like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it ain't like it's not like it's all one way. And when they frame the narrative that way, I feel like it's only to separate us and to keep us from achieving the greatness that we will achieve through unity and through non-competition.
I think also, I personally was not upset by David Oyelowo playing Dr. Martin Luther King. Mm-mm. I thought that the movie was less about him specifically than what his leadership and vision and him as a human being inspired that community to do, and what it then led the entire country to see, and the the government at that time to introduce into legislation. And I think part of the issue was also that Miss Erivo had also played Celie, which was based on a book written by an African-American woman about an African-American woman here in the South. So it was kind of like, here you are again, taking our characters and da 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 da. But I think for this one, I mean, she is clearly, from what I have seen, proven herself to be an extremely talented and very hardworking performer. This is clearly not a role that I think they would just give to anybody. And so maybe as an actor myself, I know how hard it can be to obtain in any role, especially one of this magnitude where you're essentially carrying the whole film. And so I have no doubt that she had to work incredibly hard through multiple auditions and screen tests, etc., to convince everyone and anyone who had any decision-making power that she was the best person. And I think, again, it's not like the case of Zoe Saldana and Nina Simone, where she does not look like her in any way, and they're going to have to use prosthetics and all of these other things to kind of trick the audience into believing. I think that based on who Cynthia is and how she looks and what her essence is, I could see it. I already am beginning to suspend my disbelief. And so I think, as you said, it is a more divisive tactic that is unfortunately, we can't quite shake loose of within the diaspora, that we're so separate and that we've got to draw these divided lines between what your experience was over there and what my experience was over here versus what their experience was over there, as opposed to really finding the commonality and just using this opportunity to uplift her and to support the film that has big budget behind it, has an African American female director. So there is that perspective there, very much at the guiding the whole project forward. So I feel like if there were opportunities where maybe Cynthia's quote unquote British sensibilities would be not as accurate, we would put our trust in an African American woman to say, hey, this is maybe an aspect that you're not considering. And I think that we should support the film. And also, we have had an African-American actress in Aisha Hines portray Harriet Tubman magnificently for a whole hour.
That's right.
On the show Underground, may it rest in peace. So as to John's point, where there is the money, there is the project. So how about we gather our fund? The reason why Underground couldn't be picked up by another network is because it costs so much to make each episode.
Yes.
So everybody who's complaining, start a GoFundMe or whatever.
Puff Daddy, right?
You know what I mean?
Jay-Z.
Right, Tyler Perry or whoever. Find another African American female director. Find an African American actress who probably auditioned for this role. You're acting like they auditioned a bunch of white women and then they're like, oh, let's give it to the British lady. No. So if it matters so much or if it angers you so much, then what can you do besides go on her Instagram or whatever and curse the woman out for something that she is going to pull from her heart and soul and do her best to portray this woman's story? I support her. I trust the people behind it, or at least the woman in front of it, the women in front of it. And I will wait to see at least some pictures. I mean, even with the Zoe Saldana Nina story, I mean, first of all, she didn't look like her, so I was a little upset.
No,
but and then as more images and pieces of the film came out, I was like, okay, this is not working. I kind of reserved my judgment until I saw some proof. I think let's at least give them a chance. I mean, I doubt production has even started, and already we're shitting on it. So, but that is our way sometimes.
Well, here's a couple of yes y'alls very quickly. Boys to Men's Nathan Morris lands a solo reality show, Flipping Houses. I think this is wonderful. I'm very, very excited about that.
Where is he? Like in Atlanta?
Probably. Maybe Detroit. I think they're originally from Philly. They're from Philly originally, so who knows?
Is it set in Philly?
No, I don't know. I'm talking about my ass. It could be all around the world for all I know. It doesn't really say where it is. He's going to transform a mansion in Orlando, Florida. So maybe that's.
Hey, I hope he is able to hire a lot of people of color.
Hot Properties is the name of that. So check that out. Michael Clark Duncan's family calls Omarosa a manipulating snake in a fight over their will. I'm so surprised.
What does she have to do with his will?
Well, they were married.
What?
Yeah, they were married.
Oh
they were
my God.
Yes.
They were engaged.
Engaged. I'm sorry, engaged, not married. Engaged to be married.
Yeah, that was the issue.
Yes.
They were not married, but she wants to claim all of this power of attorney over his.
Was there no will or trust? There was no will?
I think he may have given her some power of eternity, the Hall of Eternity.
This is years later. The man died a while ago.
Yeah.
It just seems so. I mean, she's on her, attention tour.
Yes.
Attention grabbing tour.
Well,
so
that's kind of the end of that because
coming up right now,
her book is sort of fading off the charts. It's kind of over this particular run right now for her. But
wow, they were together.
So maybe she's reconcentrating on the money that she knows that she deserves because of her strong black.
What do you guys think about that? I mean, you're both married, and have kids, but I'm curious, what if you were just been engaged to this woman?
I think about this is a nightmare for me, honestly, because I always think about my father, leaving all of his property to my stepmother. But
he has a living child. He would leave you and grandchildren. I don't think there's any way he wouldn't leave you something.
No, I mean, we're definitely in the will. I'm just saying, nothing that he leaves her is going to feel good to me. Do you know what I'm saying? There's nothing that my father can leave. I mean, not that I dislike Anita in any way. She's just not my mother. You know what I mean? So, God, look at us, black people discussing inheritances. How novel.
I mean, John, what do you think? Do you think that the betrothed at the time of passing is entitled to, part of the inheritance or the estate?
I think it's a wake-up call that people need to be very cautious about the people that you find yourself in a relationship with, and that you really needs to push people to get their affairs in order.
Boom.
Soon and to update it frequently. I know I do. And, I think with the best of intentions, he may have given her some kind of limited power of attorney or something like that when he was sick or something like that. But, I think ego is a terrible thing, and from the actions that I've seen from Omarosa, I don't know her personally, but she seems to be a very ego-driven person. When you add money into the factor, it's a shame when you're arguing over somebody that's not around, when your focus should be on honoring their memory and
exactly
focusing on. And if you are a person of substance, why not focus on making your own money as opposed to fighting over a dead man's estate?
Yeah, I'm 1,000%.
I would let it go personally and just move on and not be fighting over a dead man's money, or just take the money and donate it to charity and be done with it.
And then take the selfishness out of the whole equation, diffuse the whole.
Take the ego out of it.
Yeah, take the ego out of it.
I think that's a really good point. We have seen, in the examples of Prince and even Aretha Franklin, there was no will, there was no trust, and
insane.
Now
that's insane.
Family members, distant and otherwise, are fighting over the rights to the estate. These are incredibly wealthy people, and I think even if you don't have a lot of money, it is worthwhile just to save your family the hassle and the potential infighting while they're potentially going through a difficult grieving process. Handle your business. And especially because then you also don't want it to have to go through lawyers, because then whatever was left, half of that goes to the lawyers while they try to sort out the fucking business. By contrast, we have Mac Miller, who passed, prematurely. Mm-hmm. His shit was in order.
26 years old, and this shit.
I as an old man, I don't know who Mac Miller is. I've seen on my timeline that people are mourning this person.
Yes.
I have absolutely no clue.
I was in a similar...
A young white rapper.
Yes, he was, but not just any young white rapper. He was...
Apparently
he was quite talented. He had a great deal of respect for the old school. He rapped over Lord Finesse, over DJ Premier beats. He would go back.
He knew his history. He knew his hip-hop history, and I guess paid the proper respect.
Yes. Imagine Brother Sunshine catapulted into the late 2000s, contemporaneous with Drake and all these guys, but with that sort of heart. He had an opportunity. He had a number one hit, an opportunity to sort of do the traditional pop white boy thing in rap. Instead, he went left and started hanging out with Odd Future, Earl Sweatshirt, and and yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So he stayed underground. He stayed indie, and he is still he's dead now. So he can't stay anything now but dead. But while he was alive, he just
But my point is, even at 26, he knew to get his affairs in order, and I think that is something that Black people especially would do well to learn from his example, and the lack of, by contrast, of Aretha Franklin and Prince, who did not get their affairs in order and died, unexpectedly or whatnot, and now it really adds more heartache, I think, to what is already a tragic situation that your family and friends are going through. So even if you don't got shit, figure it out.
Yeah.
Who's gonna take care of the kids? Who gets your house? Who handles all your shit?
Do you want to be kept on life support, or do you want to let them unplug you? All these things are important things that you want to write down somewhere and have notarized and actually be in some sort of legal fashion. Okay, guys, it is super late, and I know I've kept John up super, super late. And I want to let him go because
you're the real MVP.
Because he's got a real job tomorrow, not like Al, because Al works for himself. My brother Al. I don't even feel bad about Al.
Al, you have a real job.
Yeah, he has a real job.
He's like Tommy.
He's Tommy, man. I ain't never seen him in a hurry to get nowhere. But John,
I got a real job tomorrow.
John, you have a real job. Why don't you remind people what it is and where they can find you and what you're up to and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. So currently I'm the curator of the arts program at University of Maryland, University College. And,
not bad.
Yep. So I do that, and I'm still on the board of American Poetry Museum, which is a museum that I founded and ran for 10 years, and they're doing some great programming right now. As I mentioned, the Poets for Puerto Rico event, and we just opened up a new exhibition of photography, and we have actually something you might be interested in, and Yaze, we have Kenny Carroll.
Hey, we love Kenny.
With his son, Kenny Carroll Jr. So,
that's legacy. Legacy.
Who is the Youth Poet Laureate for DC?
Fantastic.
Right now. So
that's fantastic. His son is, or Kenny is? Kenny or his son?
His son is the Youth Poet.
Oh, amazing.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is the first time they're reading together, which is really significant.
That's so special.
And, what's really special about Mr. Kenneth Carroll is that he wrote a review of Jazz Poet Society's first or second album, and it was not a kind review.
Of course.
And I have always respected. Yes, and I've respected his opinion ever since.
Of course. He's of course a legend in DC with poetry and the poetry community, and we're really excited to bring him and his son together for this reading. And then we have Terry Cross Davis and Hayes Davis, a husband and wife, who are also poetry giants in this area. Terry works at the Folger Shakespeare Library, and Hayes is a poetry educator at Sidwell, and they're great. They're both published poets, and they're reading together. So the theme is really family and family poetry, and
I love it.
Having discussions around that. So there's that, and then I am working on some other projects. Like I've talked with you about this podcast that I'm putting together about objects and stories behind objects. And look out for that real soon. And I'm also writing my memoir, which is taking up a lot of my time, and getting some other writing projects out there. So just staying busy, and then my family that takes up the rest of that time.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it, man. It's always an honor to talk to you, man. And I always love to hear what you're up to, because a lot of people have dreams, and I don't know. Like, if you have any dreams that you haven't pursued, I cannot wait to hear what they are, because it sounds like you were getting them all done in short order. All of our conversations sort of sound like John going, well, I've accomplished everything in this regard. But humbly, you guys, it's hard to... It sounds arrogant when I'm saying it, but it doesn't sound arrogant when he's saying it. It sounds very sad. Like, what else can we do in life? But it's great. I love it, man. You're one of my heroes.
I mean, you have to live life remembering that you could die at any moment, and you have to be responsible with that, and you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. So it's that's what drives things, and I'm just grateful for everything that I have.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
That's
especially
wonderful.
Your beautiful wife, who recently just had a birthday.
Absolutely.
She hasn't aged a day. I don't know what kind of vampire blood she's been subsisting on, but she looks amazing. She's also phenomenally intelligent. I don't know how you convinced her to procreate, but congratulations and good on you.
She's the brains of the operation. Actually, in my house, I have some extremely intelligent children and an extremely intelligent wife, and she's a senior policy analyst for youth policy. So when you look at MSNBC and these shows and they have an expert on something, she's one of those people.
I love it.
Amazing.
Kind of smile and nod whenever she talks, because I have no idea what it is, because I just look at art all day. So that's all I do.
I love it. I love it.
I very much support her, and yes, we had a wonderful birthday weekend, and yeah.
Wonderful, man. Great. Wonderful. Fantastic. I can't wait to come out to DC soon and visit y'all, and we can hang out. Honey, let's wrap it up. We have a couple of shout outs very quickly to Logical Nonsense Podcast. Thank you for reposting.
Thank you.
Two Squares Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just Say Words, who I've recently realized is still in business. They've just been distributing through Libsyn, which is what we use as well. So that means you're available on Spotify and all the other cool places.
Awesome.
And honey, anything else you want to tell the people?
Stay tuned for if you are here in Los Angeles, I'm going to be in a play with the Town Street Theater Company called In Response, which is a thematic continuation of their previous, in the year they had a 10-minute play festival called In Response, essentially to the State of the Union, and the play that's coming forth in October at the Stella Adler Theater in Hollywood is focusing on the Year of the Woman, subtitled. And it's going to be a series of scenes and poems and pieces with an ensemble that I am very grateful to be a part of. So stay tuned for more information on the dates for those shows coming up, I think, but it will be each weekend in October, Saturdays and Sundays at the Stella Adler Theater here in Hollywood. So hopefully you guys can come check it out and support some good theater by some good black folks.
Boom. You heard it here. We artsy fartsy AF. Okay. Until next time, man. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you, John. Get some rest, man. We know you got to get to work tomorrow. Hug the family, kiss the babies, all of that good stuff. We love you.
You
all right.
as well. Yeah. Tell the boys I said hello. And,
we will.
Great to see you guys as always.
All right, man.
Thank
Peace
you,
out.
John.
Boom.
Did you tell everyone where they can find us and comment and link up to us and all that good stuff?
That's a good question. We should mention that. You should check us out at all the places. The podcast Centers of the World, iTunes, Stitcher,
Spotify, Podomatic,
iHeartRadio. Actually, as a matter of fact,
Really?
yeah, Lipson be taking care of us. They just be putting us everywhere.
I don't even know what
essentially.
that means, but hey, find us
YouTube.
wherever podcasts are found. At Work with
Yes.
Kids, we're on Facebook. We post a lot there. Feel free to share your comments and your thoughts. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, also at Woke with Kids.
Amen, amen. All right, until next time, y'all, stay woke, but don't forget,
Oh.
you have the right to rest. Love you, y'all.